Love is in the air. Love is in the air. But you know what else is in the air? The truth.
Mm-hmm.
I've been seeing truths flying around left, right, and centre. It's been that kind of year. So let's get into this truth. But before we get into it, I just want to say, we're not trying to rain on anyone's parade. Nope. Celebrate what you want to celebrate. Love on your boo. Should be doing that anyways.
Nah. Couples fight 364 days a year. This is the one day where they're like, I love you, boo.
Couldn't have done it without you, babe. 'Cause it's me and you. But yeah, this one was actually a request by the young brother Hotep. So shout outs to him, always supporting. But I think it is important to know the origins of what you celebrate, the truth behind it, behind the symbology, the terminology. So let's get into it. The twisted origins of Valentine's Day.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about Valentine's Day is obviously it's said to promote love, it's said to promote romance, and even the clue is in the word, because when you look at the word romance, literally the word Roman is looking right back at you. Mm-hmm. So we can see that, the ties to Roman origins. And it's not unknown for Christian holidays to have what you might call pagan origins. This is quite common, actually. So when you look at the so-called Christian origins of Valentine's Day, it recognizes or gives respect to a martyr named Saint Valentine, in essence. Now, Saint Valentine existed in ancient Rome during the reign of Claudius II, and it was Claudius II's belief that basically married men or men who had attachments to women or who were engaged were weaker. So he basically outlawed marriage and engagement because he believed that single men were more productive for war, if that makes sense. Mind you, Claudius II was a known homosexual, and his place was the host of orgies, of which he partook in. So
he really forbade marriage while he was in his palace getting it in.
Definitely.
Just a tad hypocritical, just a tad.
Just a little. Mind you, because of what you might term his unusual sexual tendencies, he suffered from certain diseases or STDs we might call gonorrhea or syphilis or things of that nature. So anyway, he forbade marriage and engagement, essentially. Now, Saint Valentine believed he was inspired by the spirit of Cupid, which, as we know, is the Roman deity that represents love in that essence. And he would go around secretly marrying men and women in secret. Now, when this was found out by Claudius II, he had all these couples arrested that were part of this, what you might term conspiracy in his eyes. He had the men of these couples castrated and their hearts cut out and mailed to the females. So, yeah.
God damn.
Yeah. So you talk about wild and barbaric. That's that right there. It just, so when you look at the whole symbology of the heart in Valentine's Day, the chocolate heart and things of that nature, yeah, you know where it's coming from. Not only that, Saint Valentine himself was beaten to death. He was clubbed to death, and his heart was cut out and eaten by Claudius II. So,
I remember that.
Yeah. So these are the kind of barbaric things that were happening in ancient Rome. It's not a secret. It's also said that Saint Valentine himself, during the time he spent in jail or essentially imprisoned, fell in love with I believe it was the guard's daughter, and sent her a love letter, or sent her a letter just before he passed as well, which is interesting because I've seen those stories told as separate stories, because it's believed that Saint Valentine essentially was more than one person. So there were multiple Saint Valentines, and Saint Valentine in that essence was a title. The way Baba puts it is that it essentially was all one guy, these titles. But either or, you get the point. This is where the origin of the story comes from. Now, that's not the complete origin of the story. So there's certain things we've got to look at. One of the things we've got to look at is, well, why is Valentine's Day in February? Now, if you look at the etymology of the word February, it comes from the word Februarius, which means purification, essentially. So February was regarded by the Romans as a month of purification. Mind you, there was a point in time when February didn't exist on the calendar, so it was added during the Roman Empire, and at one point in time February was actually the last month in the year before it became the second. So it was essentially a month of purification where certain rituals took place in the Roman Empire that were attributed to purifying yourself, in essence. And it's also believed that the origins of that came from the Sabines, who were basically Asian Italians, and eventually the Romans and Sabines integrated. I say eventually because it was a war. The Romans wanted their women and abducted them, and this caused a war between the Sabines and the Romans, and eventually the women were like, hey, come together and, you know, let's all be a happy family, essentially. So it's believed that their Asian practices of purification then essentially were taken on by the Roman Empire. So
they kind of combined.
Exactly.
Their cultural ways, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, for lack of a better term. Now, what's also important to note is the so-called mythological origins of Rome, which revolves around the story of Romulus and Remus. Now, if you know the story of Romulus and Remus, they were, not to say illegitimate children, but they were children that the king at the time thought posed a threat to the throne. So the mother of Romulus and Remus essentially put them in a basket, and they went down a river and were met by a she-wolf who nurtured them and raised them, essentially. Interesting to point out that I've heard that story before, somewhere in the Moses story.
Yeah, it was on some Prince of Egypt stuff.
Yeah. So you know,
basket in the river.
Exactly. So you know, these stories are literally just repeated stories from culture to culture, you know, and a lot of them mythological with perhaps some sort of symbology behind them. Again, what's important to notice is that before Romulus founded Rome, according to legend, he killed his brother Remus. It's like, gosh, well, where have I heard that before? So many times so far. What are you talking about?
Cain and Abel.
Yeah. Set and Horus or Set and Osiris, you know. So it you know, the brothers at an odds with each other is such a repeated story throughout culture and history and tradition. But anyway, Romulus founded Rome, I believe it was 763 BC, and that's the way the story goes. Now, why that's significant is because there's a festival that takes place as part of what you might call the purification month of February, called Lupercalia. Lupercalia comes from the word lupus, which means wolf. So it's an acknowledgement of the she-wolf, and not just that, the Romans' general affection for wolves or canines in that respect. Now, during Lupercalia, what happens is that animals are sacrificed, goats are sacrificed, and I believe a dog is sacrificed as well. Now, there's a lot of ritual and blood elements that essentially go on during this this festival, this ritual. But one of the most significant things is they make strips out of these goats, and they would run around Rome or run around the town naked, beating particularly women, beating women with these strips, because they believed that it made women more fertile, in essence. Yeah, what can I say? Madness. This was the barbaric nature of ancient Rome. So so when they believed essentially that promoted fertility. So again, you can see the correlation, because let's keep it real, Valentine's Day, as much as about love and romance, it's about fertility. It's about, cohabiting, isn't it?
A lot of babies are probably conceived on Valentine's Day.
Yeah. Let's be real. So So you can see the connection and the ties there, and that's why it's no coincidence that Valentine's itself is in February or on February the 14th. I believe Lupercalia was on February 15th, but you can see the correlation, if that makes sense. What's also interesting is during the month of February, many battles took place in the Colosseum. So for anyone who's seen Gladiator, you might have a vision of what that might look like. It was literally that, men fighting against men fighting against animals, and this was literally their form of entertainment. The same way we go to the cinema now and watch movies.
Are you not entertained?
Yeah, pretty much. exactly that quote. So it was a huge sort of stadium, if you like, where Romans came as spectators to watch these men fight each other to death, fight animals to death. And yeah, it was brutal.
Barbaric.
And barbaric, exactly. That's the sort of pagan origins you're looking at when you're looking at this month of February, Valentine's Day. It being no coincidence that Valentine's Day takes place in that month. It all has ties back to essentially the origins of Lupercalia, the festival of purification, and all these kind of things that the Romans essentially were practicing. So yeah, it's
madness.
Yeah, it is indeed.
Just to cycle back a little bit, remember when you was mentioning Saint Valentine, he got jailed for marrying people, and you said he fell in love with, you think, the god's daughter or something like that. I remember a version of the story where it said he would send her letters and sign them from your Valentine, which can attribute to where we get this "will you be my Valentine" thing from.
Yeah, that was heavily pushed, especially, you know, I remember in sort of our younger days at school and things, that was sort of heavily pushed, where you might write a love letter to someone you've got a crush on, or be a you know, send a secret letter, like a secret Valentine, kind of like a secret Santa and those kind of things.
That whole thing.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely you can see sort of the correlations between the way Valentine's Day is practiced now and where it came from, essentially. So you know, and the kind of practices, again, that were taking place in these festivals are not too dissimilar to things like Saturnalia. So anyone knows anything about Saturnalia, that was a festival by the Romans that fell around the winter solstice. And again, that was sort of your origins of Christmas, because it's well known that Jesus, or the so-called Jesus of the Bible, wasn't born on December the 25th. It's well known by biblical scholars. So again, it's not a coincidence that these practices or these rituals or these traditions take place at certain parts of the Gregorian calendar, if that makes sense. So, yeah.
Interesting stuff. Shocking as well.
Yeah.
I never really get over the heart thing. The whole fact that hearts are used for Valentine's Day represents Saint Valentine's heart being cut out and eaten.
Yeah, it's
barbaric.
Yeah, it's not one, you know, the common, what you might term the common man and woman. It's not something we could imagine, because it's just not in our nature. But yeah, there are beings that exist on this level where whether you call it cannibalism or whatnot. And it's important to recognize that these things, even though they were more prominent and more, you might say, open in ancient times, they still happen. They still happen behind closed doors. They still happen behind closed doors. So it's important to recognize that. And in fact, our teacher wrote an actual fact called Bigfoot, where, oh gosh.
Bigfoot.
Yeah. Where there was a section of what you might call these deranged murderers or serial killers, and he was outlining their nature, essentially.
Yeah.
And
the cannibalism, it went in.
It went in. And I remember when I read that, I'm not going to lie, I had to take a few minutes. I had to put the book down and I had to take a few minutes. Like, this is a bit much. But it's the reality. So it must be known. It must be known. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's important for us to know these origins, and also know the fact, well, we can celebrate our own cultural holidays, whether it be from past or new ones we're creating. Who says we can't, you know, update our culture? We are our culture.
Indeed.
So I'm a lover of love.
Me too.
So I like the idea of celebrating love in our culture. around this time, we have something called Tasdak Zamut, Friendship Day, where we celebrate friendships. So all forms of relationship. And isn't any good relationship anyway built on friendship?
Most definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, spread the love.
Indeed.
Just not that kind of.
yeah.
I don't know what that is.
Indeed.
But yeah.
Well, yeah, it is important as well, because on your point that, you know, Baba recognizes this, and he recognizes our nature, and he understands the importance of, you can't take something away without replacing it. So that's why he gave us our culture, our language, our traditions. He understands that.
Our holidays.
Yeah, exactly. Especially in the mindset that we're in, that we want to celebrate certain things during certain parts of the year. So in the same way we talk about Christmas, we have Corrado Zamot as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and
Children's
same
Day.
with, he likes to celebrate these things. So, you know, he's very much a realist. Like any person, we all enjoy these things. And as does he. So, yeah, it's just to make sure it's rooted within our own culture and our own nature. Because when you find a lot of origins of these holidays, it's not even an agreeable nature. It's a very evil nature, a very evil origin. But that's the origin of Valentine's Day summarized. So, Tawatak, as always.
Tawatat.
Give thanks to Baba.
Indeed.
For restoring us with our culture so we can celebrate our own things and not these deranged things.
Yeah,
but yeah.
Indeed. And at the end of the day, if, you know, you so choose to celebrate Valentine's Day, you know.
At least you're making an informed decision.
Exactly. Because everyone is free to make their choice, but at least know what it is you're partaking in.
Exactly that. And to all my Sabine, Mosbatu Moisa, Asher Tasto Samot. But yeah, I'm gonna leave that there. That was a solid one, a shocking one. All sorts. But yeah. Tawatak.